This is the vlog for October 28th, 2018, and I have a vexing problem. An embarrassment of riches, basically, is what it is. Also, wearing a white shirt seems to make this white balance thing work really well. So maybe that's been my problem, is I'm not wearing enough white shirts. I don't know how many more white shirts I'll wear in the future just to do my vlogs, but I've already had my ice cream, so there's no chance I'm going to get interrupted for that. Might be other interruptions, you never know. That's what it means to do these things live the way they're done. But my problem is that there's a lot about autumn that I like, but there are enough things about autumn that frustrate me that it keeps it from really being my favorite time of year. And it used to be my favorite time of year. When I was younger, especially in like elementary school, and to a lesser extent my middle school, junior and high school days, autumn was fantastic. Even in college, I really liked autumn, and I think it's for a few reasons. First of all, autumn is when an awful lot of games and television get released. There are a lot of games that come out in advance of the holiday season to try and get in before everybody starts, saving up and spending money on the really big titles that usually come out last week of November or early December, so that they can be bought for Christmas. Television, the fall season of television usually ends up being a very nice season, with lots of cool new shows, lots of neat new ideas. And because of the combination of new television and new video games, I associate fall with creation more than I do with spring. Because while nature itself starts to slow down, the leaves fall from the trees, the weather turns nasty, people are putting out their great works. They're sharing wonderful things, and all you have to do is be a consumer and sometimes not even spend money, and you get to enjoy so much. And like I said, I really liked that when I was younger. When I was in elementary, it was less about the video games, more about the television. And when I was in middle school, it was a bit of both. And when I was in college, it was mostly games, because I'd stopped sort of watching a lot of TV in my spare time. So the problem is, now that I'm an adult, I have less time for all this new stuff that comes out. And there's so much stuff. I've broadened my horizons so much that even limiting the amount of television I watch. And in fact, I had very little to look forward to on television in the years before Netflix. Netflix has now made this even more problematic, as has Crunchyroll, which is able to share the Japanese anime fall season with me. I don't have the time to do everything that I want. And as I get older, the cold weather has a more adverse effect on my body. I have a little bit of arthritis in my back. It's on this side. It runs basically from just above it on my back. It would be just about here, down this side of my back. It's scoring, as the doctor put it, along the areas where my ligaments attach to my bones. So in the cold weather, that gets very stiff and very painful sometimes, and I slept very poorly last night. I went to bed pretty late too, so hopefully I'll get to bed at a much more reasonable time tonight. But I'm lucky, even with all these games I'm playing, like Soul Calibur, Symphony of the Night, in the re-release that I just found out about yesterday that came out with the anime. I watched I watched Castlevania yesterday. Today I watched Gundam Thunderbolt movie called Bandit Flower. That was really good. It had some of the best giant robot fight scenes that I've seen in years. It is well worth watching. I highly recommend watching the first season or movie of Gundam Thunderbolt. The movies are actually just the collection of all the episodes sometimes with a little bit of additional footage. They're all definitely high quality, and if you like jazz music, it has this fantastic jazz soundtrack, just really wonderful. But yeah, my favorite season is definitely now going to be spring. I think if summer continues to be incredibly hot and smoky, and it may end up being that that's just what we have to look forward to every year now. Spring remains clean air, cool but warming up, and everything starts to turn green, especially right around May. May is just a really wonderful month. June can be pretty good, but it can also be a little bit cool and damp for whatever reason. April also is, fairly cold and damp given this area. But basically, April is also when I start wearing shorts. And in fact, I'm probably going to be wearing slacks for the rest of the year, starting next week, or tomorrow, I should say. Yeah. I'm going to go a little bit long probably tonight. I really got into NaNoWriMo about 4 years ago is when I first used the first NaNoWriMo to write the first part of my book. But it's worth noting that at the time, my work had cut the hours back. I mean, obviously I don't work a full-time job because I take 2 months off every year. But, sorry. When we were cut back to 36 hours, 36.25 hours a week was the norm. And when we were cut down to that, they recommended using the extra free time for whatever you could. And that was, I tried to take in stride. It was a little bit annoying. It was really problematic that I was going to be making way less money. I even got a raise at that time, but the actual raise ended up being a minuscule, not even 5% overall increase in the amount of money I was making. But I did end up having more free time and basically making the same amount of money. So I used that time to write. But now that we have gone back to a 40-hour week, I do not have the same kind of time in the morning, especially, to do all of the writing that I used to do. And National Novel Writing Month is sort of out of my level of... I can't commit to it the way that I could before. And that's sort of a problem. I tried to do it, the last time I tried to do it, I failed. I just was not able to make it happen. I got to about 40,000 words and I ran out. I had sort of a problem with my family, and it just meant that I didn't have the will to keep going. And I wasn't really pleased with how the writing was turning out either. If I ever go back and do that part of that book again, I'm going to have to redo it, maybe almost from scratch. It's one of those times when I sort of wish I had an editor just to run ideas by to see what sounded good, what kind of things would stick to the wall. But it is the case that this creative fountain that sort of springs forth every fall affects me too. I feel like I should be creating in that time span. And one year, it wasn't NaNoWriMo, but I did do a short story over the month of October, a horror story that I was quite proud of. But I did receive some very good criticism, and I think I would go back and rewrite at least one part. I could also end up turning it into a novel. As a short story, it's 30,000 words, and basically all I would have to do is double that, and that's very reasonably first-time author's novel. It would be 60,000 words or so, and the first Harry Potter book was between 70,000 and 80,000 words. So, definitely within reason. And I could do a lot. I could just expand upon the descriptions of different areas, which is much more important, I think, in horror, sometimes for setting the tone than the actual action. I understand that action takes an awful lot of effort to make it work because you can't drag action on for too long. People lose track of what's going on when it's written prose. It works much better as a visual media than it does as prose. And so prose is much better for description and dialogue. It's an interesting horror story for dialogue because essentially there are only two characters, which isn't quite true, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody. I also sometimes wonder if it would be worth putting it up online to see how people would like it. Because the problem with putting it up online is that you then sort of screw yourself out of selling it as a book. If people know where they can get it and they can just, get it for free, that's definitely not terribly useful. But on the other hand, it becomes something of a portfolio. You can show people, you can give them a link, and then they can read it and see what your style of writing is. So it has its benefits and its problems if you want to go that route. I would definitely never put my book up for free. I do want to sell that to a publisher and make some money off it if possible. It's not like the driving force in my life that it once was. I'm glad that I did it. But where I am right now, I would much more likely make a new book that's sort of a prequel that would allow me to tell a shorter story and also turn what is my first book now and what would become the second book into another shorter story, which makes it easier to publish. If I establish a bunch of these characters and their characterization in a first book, I can spend less time doing that in the now second book, which drastically shortens it. Plus, it gives me a chance to use a bunch of ideas that I either spent too much time doing or didn't even use in the first place, and still, keep it to a reasonable length. Anyway, speaking of reasonable length, I've gone way longer than I even intended to. So I'm going to cut myself off here and just say, I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.